r/AskReddit. What's the most inappropriate time you laughed? This was at a ballet school performance. It was for kids ranging from 5 to 16-year-olds. For one of the younger age groups, they did this thing where one kid pranced from one corner of the stage to the other, and then another kid would do the opposite, in a big X pattern. And they would have these gigantic shit-eating grins on their faces. Just horribly precious. Well, I started losing it at about the 15th kid, but it went on for like 40 children. By the end I was in tears and all the other adults in the audience near me had found it contagious, so everyone was just sitting there laughing at their own children. At my grandaunt's funeral. She was a big, jolly food lover while alive, and is sorely missed. Everything was going along, lots of tears, while the vicar was giving the eulogy, until he shared her last words. Come on. A little whipped cream isn't going to kill me. I lost my shit. This was 10 years ago, and I still feel terrible for laughing. Group therapy. A kid, 22 or so, but you get the idea, was talking passionately about his struggles with Asperger's and OCD. He had a squeaky voice. He started talking about his OCD categories, things that belonged under the earth, things that belonged on the earth, things that belonged in the water, and things that belonged in space. He named specific objects. Rocks, bugs, etc. He said there were some things he could not fit neatly into his categories, even if they seemed like they were supposed to be in one. This distressed him. He bemoaned cars. He bemoaned women, and pointed at one. Then with no seg, announced that the reason he was there was because he snuck into the zoo at night and leapt into the lion enclosure. I had to bury my face in my elbow and turn away. Of course his problems were real, but it just seemed so out of place on a day when people were talking about who diddled them when. Wouldn't cars and women belong on the earth? Why don't they fit neatly? 'Cause some ducker decided to put a car in space and let women up there in the ISS. Cadaver room. One of my classmates accidentally stuck his finger in a kidney because he thought it was behind glass and tried to poke the glass. He was like, squish, oh duck. In high school we saw a display of healthy versus smoking lungs. I went up and poked the healthy ones thinking they weren't real, and I guess I just had to feel them. I was horrified when the unimpressed person at the display told me not to touch and that they were real. Me and a friend were altar boys. An older woman took to the podium to read a Bible passage. The passage described how Jesus loves everyone, the sick and the healthy, the rich and the poor, the circumcised and the uncircumcised. That's all it took for a pair of 10-year-old boys to start laughing hysterically in front of a packed church. Could you imagine being at a urinal next to Jesus? He looks over and then into your eyes and says, I see that you are uncircumcised, my brother. I truly love you. My computer's teacher in middle school told me he was run over by a car when he was a child. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He was not joking. A buddy of mine tried to fart on the pew in church, and ducking and loaded a dump truck load of shit into his pants on accident. This was during a quiet moment, and I was absolutely howling with laughter. We were at my uncle's funeral whose death was a surprise. I was standing with my cousin who just came back from abroad to attend her dad's funeral, and was breaking down. My aunt, the deceased sister, came to tell my cousin that someone we know is apologizing for not being able to attend the funeral because she's in the hospital due to a car accident. My aunt went on describing the woman's very difficult condition and how she had an iron pole stuck into her forehead. 10 minutes later, the woman appears through the door in perfect health with just some scratches. My cousin sees her and look at me from the other side of the crowded silent room, and we both can't stop laughing for the rest of the funeral. So, she lied about her condition and got called out firsthand? That's hilarious. I don't blame you one bit. or the aunt was trying to make the injury sound worse to make the cousin feel better about that person not attending, but the car accident person had no idea and came as soon as they were able. A young teenager was leaning forward in a chair at a restaurant, lost traction, and slammed their face into the table. Absolute hysterical sobbing ensued. Their parents stopped eating their salads to make sure they were okay. They were, aside from a nosebleed. I was sitting at the table next to them, and cracked the duck up at the sound of them hitting the table, and even more, when they started crying. I was a horrible human being in that moment. Feel bad after the fact, but in the moment it tickled me to my core. A woman got on stage to sing during a friend's wedding as part of the ceremony. It was naturally a song the bride and groom chose. As soon as she opened her mouth, it became clear that she absolutely tone deaf. It sounded like an animal being tortured. I was trying not to laugh, but two guys behind me started laughing, and it set off a chain reaction of laughter. Even the groom was red-faced from trying not to laugh. She just kind of sheepishly left the stage afterward. This happened at my wife's grandfather's funeral. A woman sang a completely tone-deaf and broken version of Amazing Grace. Her voice was somehow gravely and ear-piercing at the same time. My wife and I sat there squeezing each other's hands as hard as we could to hold back the laughter. My daughter was in probably first or second grade, and she was doing an online math homework where she had to answer a bunch of math questions, and it would give her percentage correct at the end, and then re-ask the ones she missed. She was down to one question, and got it wrong, so she got 0% correct. She bust out crying, because she got 0%, and for some reason I thought that was so funny, that I bust out laughing and couldn't stop. And then she got even madder, and cried harder, because I was laughing at her, which made me laugh harder, which made her cry harder. Some say they are still laughing/crying to this day, at ever-increasing levels. In a technology class a couple years ago, for whatever reason we were having a talk about Kermit the Frog, and my teacher told the class to quiet down and stop Kermit. Someone then said in a completely quiet classroom, in a flawless Kermit voice, "I never die." This was absolutely the best time to laugh. A few years ago I was participating in a religious ceremony with my extended family. I'm not religious, but my mom and her family are, so I agreed to participate. I was tasked with reading one of the sections aloud, and had to read off a list of titles of the Virgin Mary. Most of them were pretty straightforward: Queen of the Angels, Queen Most Holy, etc. But there's one section that starts with the word Virgin. I get to it, and I'm trying not to smirk, but as soon as I said the phrase, Virgin Most Powerful, I glanced at my brother and my SO, and they were grinning at me. Their grins caused me to burst into giggles, and I had to excuse myself, while my mom glared knives into me. My brother continued the rest of the reading. Was working at a sign shop, and me and this other guy were drilling holes into some wood paneling when the other guy said, "Hey look," and acted like he was going to drill into the side of his head. The drill bit he was using was one of those flat and wide ones used for boring larger holes, and while it was spinning it grabbed a hold of his hair, ripped out a chunk, and left a perfectly round $half sized bald spot on the side of his head. I had to set down whatever I was doing, since I was laughing so hard, and I kept apologizing to him for doing so. He told me the next day that his girlfriend reacted the same way I did. Honestly, ripping out his hair was probably one of the better outcomes that could have happened. I was once hired to sing at a funeral, and, right before I was called up, the little boy in front of me ripped the loudest fart. I dug my face into my lady friend's shoulder and my whole body trembled as I tried to keep it together. Within seconds I was at the pulpit, and trying to come up with what I would do if I broke out laughing. I sang to the best of my ability at the time, with a cough every now and then. We left immediately afterwards, and laughed in the car till we couldn't breathe. After the most horrible terrorist attack in our country's history, I was in class with some people who survived it, and one of these was a really fat girl. She was telling the story about how she survived, and it included a part where she said that she rolled down a hill, and despite the seriousness of the situation, I couldn't stop myself from laughing at the thought of her actually rolling down a hill. Yes, I know I'm going to hell. I just thought about that for a second, and I think him joining you in hell